100 years of filmmaking, 100 years of making songs and creating memories for people young and old. And boy, oh boy, do the people nowadays desire nothing more than Disney downfall, as my YouTube page is played with Disney versus whatever studio you can think of, as well as K-pop Demon Hunters versus Disney. As someone who has experienced the entire Genshin versus Wuhua tribalism, as well as even being a part of it and feeling the fire, it is truly astounding how much people will go in order to pray for the downfall of a studio. I came across this short on YouTube that caught my attention, and its title is Disney is Mad at K-pop Demon Hunters' Success. And honestly, sometimes it really makes me wonder why people are so on about creating false narratives. I mean, I have been watching Disney trailers lately, and there is nothing on the page that says that they aren't happy with K-pop Demon Hunters' success. And a YouTube comment that I've received really made me ponder about these unhealthy obsessions with seeing a studio's downfall. Sometimes it makes you wonder why people can't go to a cafeteria and enjoy a cup of coffee without saying, boy, this coffee is much better than Starbucks. I always had mixed emotions about Starbucks. I'm personally not a fan of Starbucks initially because I heard that the prices are really expensive and the coffee wasn't really good. But after paying a sum to taste Starbucks for myself, I was like, you know what? This actually ain't bad. And Starbucks became one of my favorite coffee brands that honestly, when I tried another coffee brand, I was like, yeah, this ain't really as good as Starbucks. Now, don't get me wrong. There's nothing wrong with comparing a show that you like to another just to appreciate the differences. There are some harmless comparisons between Genshin and Wuwa for beginners that just want the experience, and it's fascinating how these little comparisons can escalate into full blown wars. Now, I'll be real, as someone who has grown up with both Disney and Studio Ghibli, I genuinely find the comparison between both studios rather bizarre because Studio Ghibli has their own charm, and I will be real, they kind of are like the Disney of the anime world, whether you like the way I see it or not. And as someone who has grew up with Ponyo, I definitely had fond memories, but Disney just hits different. But that will be a conversation, another video for another day on why I think Disney still does it better. Today, we're just going to focus on this whole Disney's downfall thing and this whole Disney is angry at XXX Studio being better and stuff like that. And honestly, sometimes I wonder what comes across the minds of these people that when they see a failure in Disney's movies, they're like, yeah, this studio can make it. There is seriously no other studios that have lasted for 100 years. I mean, you can say that Disney has the advantage of having a hit starter, starting way back from the 19th century all the way until now. But let's be real, how many films, artists, studios can actually last as long as a Disney? It's almost as if the name Disney itself has become like a stink like an old furniture that has been sitting there, and everyone is just praising this old furniture so much that the new people that come in and see this old furniture, they're like, nah, I don't think that it's that good anymore. It's just an old furniture. I'll be real, Disney is an old studio. They have lasted for 100 years. And to put that into perspective, that's almost like one third of those classical music made way back from the Renaissance that have lasted until today. So for Disney to be able to achieve 100 years of dreams and happiness and fulfilling people's childhood, they have definitely made it so far. And my point is that 100 years of Disney doesn't mean 100 years of success. If you look at Once Upon a Studio, you will see some rather underrated characters, as well as some films that, as well as characters that were featured, even though their films didn't do very well. And sometimes it just makes you wonder what is behind the minds of these animators? Because despite everyone saying that Snow White live action was a failure, everyone hates it, Disney still continued to release Elio. And recently they've just released the trailer of Zootopia 2, which is kind of funny because Bad Guys 2 just came out on August 1st in the theaters. And as someone who managed to watch Bad Guys on Channel 5, I was really elated to see Bad Guys 2. I'm just so glad to see the characters. But it just really makes you think, is Disney afraid of their failures? And if everyone is criticizing them so much, why are they still continuing? I think that the misconception people had is that the more they rile and say that Disney is a failure, that Disney's characters are fake, they don't have emotions, they're not good, the more Disney will be like, oh my goodness, yeah, guys, we can't do this, man. Everyone is saying our characters are so bad, so bad that no one can appreciate it. But is it really though? Even before Disney has competitors like Sony Picture Animations, I am pretty sure there is some war out there between Studio Ghibli and Disney, right? Because before Disney, I am not sure of any anime that is widely compared, but then Studio Ghibli is like, as I mentioned, the Disney of the anime world. And so it's natural that people who grew up with Ponyo and Bambi would start to compare each other, them with each other, or people who have grown up with Princess Mononoke, Studio Ghibli film I haven't watched yet, but plan to check out, is compared with the new heroine from Wish. It just makes me think like, what is the point of these comparisons? As I've mentioned earlier, comparisons between a film you like to appreciate the differences in the nuance is completely fine, but then you have people comparing the anime Belle to Disney Belle and saying that the anime Belle is better because it's anime. It's almost as if these anime lovers are just shitting on Disney because they are Disney and not because Disney is about filmmaker. And I will be real. Disney wouldn't be phased by K-pop Demon Hunters' success because they have 100 years of legacy behind them. Even if none of their films were perfect and people were constantly criticizing them and saying how bad it is, 100 years of filmmaking is is still impressive. I mean, who on earth can endure such harsh criticisms and still continue and say, yeah, guys, let's move on with that project. We're not going to let the haters get to us? Because I'll be real, whenever haters get onto my channel, my page, my art, telling me that no one wants your art, Lamau, and shitting on me because of the decisions that I've made, it makes me wonder what's the point of me being here, and I'm just constantly asking myself these questions and wallowing in self-doubt and pity as I complain to good old Gemini. But Disney is different. The more criticisms they have, the more they seem to be motivated, because behind the scenes, behind all this hating, shaming, downfalling, Disney has creative projects along the way, like Frozen 3 and Zootopia 2 coming out, and those are really good films. And the thing is, because of Snow White's failure, one of the directors in Disney actually decided not to make a Tangled live action, and Rachel Zegler is no longer a part of Disney, I believe. I didn't really follow the news because it doesn't bother me. And I kind of like the idea of the Snow White live action. So it seems like Disney still cares, but they might not be showing it as obviously. And let's just be real here, even if you hate Disney, even if you hate the cartoon style, you would have to admit that Disney has made good films. I mean, I've been watching Alex Mayers lately, and I consider him to be one of the more honest critics that is able to talk about what he likes and doesn't like about the show. And even he, who is quite critical of what he's watching, is able to appreciate Tangled. And I guess that's the magic of Disney, right? You might not be a fan of cartoon style, and Disney is still able to do it. And again, I think the reason why people don't want to acknowledge that is because Disney is overhyped and overrated, and it's about time that another studio is better than Disney. But I mean, if you were to compare the old films of Disney compared to K-pop Demon Hunters, I think they easily outshine. You know, people just look at Disney failures and compare to one film's success and think that Disney is going to fail because of that. I mean, if Disney was going to fail, they would have given up a long time ago. But the fact that they have 100 year, a century of legacy just proves to us of their resilience and perseverance. In fact, I would even like to highlight that 100 years of filmmaking is not 100 years of perfection. It is 100 years of imperfections, trials, failures, over and over and over again until they reach where they are today. I honestly think that the reason why modern Disney seems to be falling short compared to the old Disney is because nowadays Disney seems to be just selling their merchandise, like using their old characters like Winnie the Pooh, Lilo and Stitch, Mickey Mouse, Donald Duck, so on and so forth to make money. You can tell that they are kind of so-called milking money off of their old characters. That's a huge success. And I think that's why the studio's quality of animation isn't up to par, because they believe that as long as they generate something interesting enough, fans will buy their merch and they wouldn't really have to put in any effort. It's kind of like how Genshin has amazing trailers and amazing music, but the game itself feels so clunky to play. I think that Genshin and Disney are kind of similar in the sense that they are a big corporation with very well done the world building, the characters, the character design, so on and so forth. Like these two giants definitely have people obsessed, and it really makes you wonder why Disney is such the benchmark. And I also like to give you guys a thought. If Disney really was that suckish, why do people always say like, "Oh, this film is better than Disney. Oh, this film is better than Disney. Oh, this game is better than Disney. Oh, this anime is better than Disney." Do people realize that the more they talk about Disney, the more they are actually fueling the hype for Disney? Negative attention is still attention, and people do get curious even if it's negative. For instance, if someone were to say like, "Oh my goodness, the noodles, it's so bad. You shouldn't try it." While some people might be convinced and avoid the stalls completely, there are also curious cats that would like to have a taste, as long as there's no roach in the soup. And it's really that curiosity that fuels audience retention, right? I mean, some people can say that Miraculous Ladybug is bad and they still kind of stay to see if the show will eventually improve or continue falling down the hill further than improving themselves. And I think I would like to say that in the hands of a good writer, even a bad story can become good. Conversely, if a good story was in the hands of a bad writer, even a good story will feel like slop. Again, I'll just give Genshin as an example because it's the most relevant nowadays and the one that I can think of my head. Right? People are always saying that Genshin has amazing lore, amazing music, amazing characters, backstories, but the way they present it in the game is just so bad that people don't want to play anymore. And I think that's the same thing that's happening here for Disney, where people are like, yeah, I'm expecting something, and then it's just slop. Remember, I talked about how I think that the Snow White idea was good, and I genuinely think so. Because hearing the idea of Snow White being a rebellious princess who fell in love with a thief, It's honestly quite an interesting premise if you think about it. I honestly think that Disney does have this issue where they are afraid to step out of their comfort zone and make something original. A lot of the Disney films are inspired by books, and I can definitely see why. When you are just reading chunks and chunks of text, sometimes it's hard to visualize and imagine the characters in action. And so, films adapting from books isn't a bad idea or motive at all. It just boils down to execution. I remember reading this comment on this video about Genshin on how Genshin should have a novel that expounds on the world. And I think it's the opposite that's happening here for Disney. So while Genshin is telling their story through animation and gameplay, Disney is telling the story through animation by bringing the book alive. And I think that's what makes some of the films so good. And honestly, if I could add on, there are times where I don't even believe that Disney made these films. Like I honestly can't believe that Disney made songs like Hellfire or stories like Jungle Book. I do remember seeing the characters in Jungle Book, and I didn't know that they were from Jungle Book. The fascinating thing about Disney is not that they have the most complex character designs or the most upbeat music like K-pop Demon Hunters or any other films that you can think of. Definitely, there are films that are better than Disney. That's nonetheless to say. But I genuinely think that the success of Disney is not because they are better than other studios or that they are better the story is better than these other stories. I think the reason why Disney is so captivating is because of how they have shaped our childhood. Like I love Bambi. It's one of my favorite Disney movies of all time. Before I watched Bambi, I wasn't really into any shows and stuff like that. I was a young kid. What could I be into, right? And I think Disney has shaped our childhood such that it's magical and dreamy. There are some people that think that Disney is cringy because of that. Like nowadays, when they think of Disney, they just think of like this generic, boring art style, and then they start to talk about how K-pop Demon Hunters isn't afraid to use anime expressions in their art, mixing cartoons and anime together. But is it fine if I add on that I do think that the films to come might actually be better than Disney because they learn from the mistakes. The same way how Wuhua learned from Genshin's mistakes and helped it to reach to where it is. Some people might think that Disney is nostalgia baiting us using films like Zootopia, Frozen, and so on. And honestly, as an artist, I can confidently say that I don't think that working on a sequel with fascinating visuals and making a trailer on it is nostalgia baiting. Yeah, sure, Disney could be capitalizing the success of their old films and then making horrible sequels. But that's why I do have hope that they will still improve. The difference between Disney and gacha games is that the directors, the artists, they are always changing. 100 years in of a studio ongoing is not an easy feat. And just like any other hawker centers and marketplaces that you've been in, definitely the owners will change and what used to be good might not be as good. Because let's be real, technology is advancing, the world is changing. We are so used to fast paced movies nowadays that I can't blame Disney from moving from the nostalgic kind of tragic dark story to a more modernized albeit random stories that they have created. And 100 years of storytelling easily means that creative burnout could be knocking on the door anytime. I was astounded when I figured out that Disney has over 500 characters. I thought that I had a lot of characters when I have like 20 OCs, but Disney really say take the number and multiply by 5. I mean, 500 characters from a 100-year-old studio. It's no wonder they seem to be losing their ideas. And I think this creative burnout is exactly why the creators of Batman decided to stop creating Batman once they have finished it. They understand that continuing a series when you do not have inspiration is the way to go downhill. And I think that's what's happening with Disney, right? Because Disney's old film has made them so big. If they were to go on a hiatus or a break now, it's almost like they aren't continuing anymore. So they're just creating anything that will captivate an audience and hope that it will make it, you know. But I also just want to add on and say that just because some films are bad, it doesn't mean that people can't appreciate it or improvement is impossible. Let me give you some illustrations. Taiwanese dramas have always known to be cringy for old people, slow, clunky, and just not like your typical K dramas. That's what I always hear about Taiwanese dramas. And sometimes when it plays on the television, even though I am curious about what it's about, I think of the negative remarks like, oh, this is cringy, this is for old people, and I step away. But when I reconnected with one of my favorite Hokkien songs from my childhood, and watched Night Market live, I actually enjoyed it. I genuinely enjoyed the lore behind the characters. I love the natural Hokkien dialogue in the story. And even though Taiwanese dramas are known to have slower pacing in their camera movements, the way how the actors portrayed themselves in the film made it captivating enough for me to continue watching and even shed a few tears. It was one thing for me to love the songs from Night Market Live. It was another to witness how these children grow up to become the grown men and women that they are that shaped the story. And of course, I still have a lot to chase when it comes to Night Market Life, but I just love the deep lore inside. And not gonna lie, I was even inspired by it because these Taiwanese dramas aren't afraid to introduce as many characters, even background characters, to bring life to the world. And I think that is the negative remarks that stop people from appreciating it. Another good example would be locally. So Singapore films are known to be not really good because of our limited land resources as well as directors and so on. We are not in America where there are big names to work with us. So when I watched films like Living with an Expat and Alienated, I was genuinely impressed. I did not expect a Singaporean show to have such bloodshed, sacrifice, and just such momentum inside the story. Spoilers alert for those who haven't watched Alienated, made by Singapore directors and acted by Singaporeans. But Jason Chang, I don't know how to pronounce that, is one of the best male actors I've ever known. He's so good at acting in Alienated. He just brings the character Chris to life, and it really makes you realize that passion makes all the difference. Even Singaporean films that are known to be relatively simple and just about school life and so on is able to come up with things like that. When I watched Living with an Expat, I did not expect myself to enjoy it so much. I literally binge watched it in 2 days, and I know someone that have worked with the people inside the film, which makes it even more exciting. And it just goes to show that a bad rap doesn't mean that they won't improve. In fact, Sneaky Sushi from Singapore has also made some comparison videos of Crime Watch changing over the years, and you can really see the quality update. Sure, there are definitely some old songs that are timeless, and the new actors might never be able to match up to that standard. But I think what really gives hope is that every single year, new, talented, passionate artists are born. And maybe now Disney Studio doesn't have those old animators anymore because these animators that used to work in Disney 20 years ago would have grown up, right? They would have aged, and it's no wonder that the film's quality is changing. As I mentioned before, it's the same way how a hawker in the hawker center their children might not be able to do it as well as them because they don't have that kind of experience. And I think that Disney would probably need another 50 years to go back to the standards where they are, since old directors retire, new directors come to the market, right? My Little Pony Gen 5 is a good example to illustrate this as well. It's interesting to read that My Little Pony Gen 5 was initially meant to be a better story than it is now, but unfortunately, the good director passed away, and so naturally, the good stories had to be scraped, and we get what we have. And it just goes back to the whole, a bad story can be written good in the hands of a good writer, and conversely, a good story can become bad in the hands of a good of a bad writer. But I think what defines good and bad writing is entirely subjective, because there are people who enjoy Snow White. There are probably people who enjoy Wish. There are some films where, even with people not being a fan of it, there are still people that come to enjoy it. As I mentioned, some people find Miraculous Ladybug to be horrible, but other people defend it like their life depends on it. Or how I honestly despise the Sailor Moon manga because I think that it's a wasted potential. But there are still people who think that the Sailor Moon manga is awesome. So at the end of the day, I don't think one or two failures, even 10 failures, determine the fate of a studio. We have to remember that Disney has 100 years of experience. And as an artist now, and I'm trying to draw Disney's art style, I can comfortably say that the Disney art style is really hard to emulate. And you can tell that Disney has inspired a lot of people. You can tell that in old animations, even in Japanese animations, they are also subconsciously inspired by cartoon styles. And those were the kind of art styles I genuinely love. Regardless of what is going on in Disney, I am genuinely hopeful because they are still going on. As long as the creator hasn't given up on their vision and they continue to create, even if the story is bad and it could be better, it is still an attempt. I mean, maybe I'm not a fan of the other shows that I mean, Jason Chung is acting in because it's a different film. That doesn't mean that I can't appreciate the fact that he is still working on other shows. The fact that they go on is the most important thing. And I have learned that instead of being unhealthily obsessed with hoping for a studio's downfall, we should just enjoy the stories as they are. And that's all I have for you. I hope you enjoyed my struggle drawing Albedo as a Disney character, and I'll see you all next time. As always, let me know what you think in the comments down below. If you agree with what I said and think that Disney can still go on and you still love Disney like I do, to tell me in the comments. If you absolutely despise Disney and think that I'm a Disney shield, please be civil about it as well. And that's all I have for you. Bye bye.